welcome everybody to episode 6 of the Broad Reach podcast. And this is a really special episode because we're joined with another skipper from the GGR 2022, a legend, Guy DeBoer. Guy was the second American entrant in the GGR 2022 alongside Elliott Smith. And Guy is originally from New Orleans. He's living in Key West, Florida. And Guy, we're so happy to have you with us. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure to be here.
Just a quick first question, Guy. Are you in the States? Are you in the Bahamas? Are you over in Fuerteventura? Where are you at the moment?
No, I'm in Key West, Florida.
Okay.
So I'm the last island of the Florida Keys, just 90 miles from Cuba, from Havana.
Oh,
and
cool.
Judging by your background, it looks like maybe you're on some sort of vessel.
Yeah, I own a 36-foot very unique boat, Magic. She's a 36-foot commuter. She's got a full interior. It gives a beautiful ceiling behind me. But she only weighs about 7,000 pounds, and she only draws 8 inches of water.
Wow.
Oh.
So when I see a sandbar, I don't. I actually pull up right on it.
Nice. Am I right in saying you restored that boat and it belonged to your brother previously?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't. Salvage is a better term. In 2017, Hurricane Irma came here, and she was in a really safe harbor on a floating pontoon. But 3 boats broke loose and came into her slip. And sitting behind me was a 16-foot hole, about 1 to 2 feet tall, and the bow was crushed. The starboard stern was crushed. So she was a mess. And my older brother decided that he didn't want to repair her. He wanted to move on to a new, bigger boat. And so he asked me, his younger brother, would I like her? And I said, sure. So it took 2 years to repair her. And of course, I'm an ADD personality. I got hooked on the GGR before I finished her. So literally weeks before I sailed across the Atlantic, the deck was primed and the boat was in the water, but I had to put final paint on it so she wouldn't deteriorate, and I've done that. So.
Wow, that's excellent. That sounds like a real passion project.
Yeah. I'll send you a picture of her. So she's quite a boat.
Cool. We love that. Guy, before we get into GGR related stuff, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your background, because it sounds like you have an amazingly colorful background. I know you grew up in New Orleans. New Orleans, what a place, like, famous for Creole culture, food, Mardi Gras. Like, I know you grew up like in and around the yacht club there. Could you talk a little bit about like who were the most influential people when you were growing up, and a little bit about the yacht club, if you don't mind?
Well, it all starts with our parents. My father is Dutch. He's from Scheveningen. They're on the sea, there outside The Hague, and he went to the Merchant Academy and became a deck officer. And he was there during World War II. And so at the end of the war, he went to sea, and he ended up. The ship picked up some passengers in Houston, Texas. One of them was my mother. By the time the ship got to Rotterdam, she moved in with my grandparents.
Wow, what a story!
Yeah, and of course Holland was still devastated, just like most of Europe because of the war. So she lived there for several years, and eventually got pregnant with my older sister Joy, and they decided to immigrate, back to the States and my mother's hometown, New Orleans. So my father, started the family there, so to speak. My sister, and I'm one of six, so we were all born there. And my father, grew up sailing in Holland and joined the New Orleans Yacht Club. New Orleans has two yacht clubs. The Southern Yacht Club is like the big, sort of like the established club. The New Orleans Yacht Club was more of a community club, more of we might say regular people. That's how I refer to it. I went through the junior sailing program and stuff there, and that's what started the whole process. So I've been sailing since I've been 6. So.
And I believe you actually had some Olympic trials. Is that right, in sailing?
Yeah. In New Orleans, the Finn North Americans came there in the mid-'70s, and I happened to know about it, and I acquired an old Finn when I was a teenager. And I'm 6'6", and I'm a big guy. So even though I was a teenager, I could sail a Finn, but it was just a horrible experience as far as on the race course. But Finn went away, and eventually I followed my older brother to Key West, and it's from there that I continued my sailing, and then I moved to Coral Gables, Miami, and discovered the Starboat. So I did. I started sailing with some of the top star sailers back then, and eventually became a crew for one of the top young Americans, and for the '84 Olympics. And unfortunately, he determined I wasn't quite good enough, so I was replaced. But in 1988, I took up the Finn again, and I did the complete full Olympic trials and stuff. But the Olympic trials are the hardest thing. And to make go to the Olympics in the United States is tough, because I can name a long list of great sailors, Americans, that don't win the trials because only one boat gets to go. So
yeah,
I wasn't in the top 3, but I gave it my best.
I can only imagine it must be fiercely competitive. But what an amazing experience since you were so young. And can you talk a little bit about what stage did your journalistic? Like, I know you're a writer and you have a career in media. You have a publishing company called it's Conch Life, I believe. Is that your own the little network with a big voice? That's your company, yeah, your newspaper.
With the big voice. Well, we actually started as an AM radio station. That was the AM radio is not very popular, so we quickly transitioned to newspaper. But no, in about 1987, I moved into advertising sales for a business publication in Miami, and did that for a number of years. And then I moved to Detroit, Michigan. One of the local sailors there gave me a big donation, and so I could go up and sail his big boat with him. So I did that for the summer, and but I eventually stayed for 14 years, and so I started a newspaper up there, and I started a yacht brokerage company. So I arrived in '91, and I left in 2005. In 2005, I moved back to Key West.
Ah, cool. Brilliant.
Guy, we'd just like to know a little bit about the background. We know it's a Toshiba 36, right? Where did you get this boat? Where did it all begin? What's the story of Spirit?
Well, because after the Olympic stuff, I went on racing big boats, till I sort of retired from that in 2008. And so I did an analysis of the boats that were allowed in the Golden Globe. I actually discovered the Cape George 36, which is Kirsten's boat. Yeah. And it came down to actually buying Kirsten's boat or my boat. And through the analysis I did with 2 yacht designers, determined that, I felt and strongly believe that the Toshiba is the fastest of the designs that's allowed to be in the GGR. So I went out and looked for them, and I found my boat in the Eastern Shore of Maryland, basically Annapolis area, and I purchased her in November 2019.
And I believe, Guy, you decided to shorten the mast, and that was something that the previous GGR winner, Jean-Luc, did. And I know I heard you on a previous interview talking about sails that you had. They were designed in Chicago, made in Miami. I'm just wondering, how did you find for the time that you were sailing in the race? How did your sails work out on the shorter mast in terms of performance of the boat?
Well, I mean, for one, going back to the decision of shortening it, is that one, when I decided to enter the race, I made it a point to contact all the skippers that I'd be sailing with, and I spoke to them a lot. Like Pat Lawless, the Irishman, and I consider to be best of buddies.
Yeah.
As is the other sailors. But Jean-Luc, who was the winner of the race, I think I became a little annoying to him sometimes because I asked him an enormous amount of questions over that period of time, and he was very, very honest and stuff, and felt that he shortened his mast 1.5 meters, and in doing so, when his boat pitch poled, he's convinced that the only reason his mast stayed vertical was because of that. Now his mast was damaged. The D2s on the starboard side ripped down, so we had to do some jury rigging and stuff. But the most important thing is the mast stayed up, which was why he was allowed to finish the race. And he had an enormous lead when this happened. So he sailed more conservatively, and yet was still to win by about 400 miles. So I did the exact same thing. I was able to reduce my mast 1.5 meters. Just like Jean-Luc, I went with a large Roach mainsail. So I lost very little square footage overall in the sail plan. The boat performed extremely well. Unfortunately, for all of the sailors in the 2022 race, the Bay of Biscay was just horrible. And I did not do a good job tactically getting out of the bay. So
yeah,
I found myself about mid-fleet. And when I haven't even done the research, but when I rounded Cape Finisterre, I was already a day or more behind Simon.
Well, we know the Bay of Biscay is notoriously difficult to get out of. But before we get to more details of the GGR, one more thing about your boat I just wanted to ask you, Guy, was I know you had one 175 watt solar panel, and you also had am I right in saying you had a C hydro generator? And I was just wondering, for the time that you did race, how did you find those? I noticed in the footage, I saw you using a grinder, like a battery operated grinder. Like if you're charging stuff like that on board, were you able to do that?
Oh, you mean battery grinder? Yeah, well, that was allowed in the race. But a battery grinder plugs into a cigarette lighter.
Oh, it's perfect. So it doesn't affect your system too much.
Car as an example, you don't need 100 American 110 volts.
Perfect.
Yeah, the two tools allowed in the GGR is a grinder and a power drill.
Ah, excellent.
And both are battery power. And no, I didn't have any power issues with my boat at all. Of course, I was still in sunny weather and stuff, but I would continue to play with my watt and C, even though I didn't really need it, just because I didn't think it was really that hurting the boat's performance that much. So I would drop it a few times at night and let it stay in there the whole night.
Okay, excellent. I think, Sean, were you going to ask Guy some questions about the GGR now specifically?
Yeah, so Guy, you spoke previously about having individual sponsors and not corporate sponsors. So we're just curious, like, how do you even go about beginning your journey into the GGR? What's the first thing that you do? How do you assemble a team? What's the starting point? When you decided I'm going to go into this race, what did you then do next?
Well, Let me think about that for a second. Well, one, you just do it. You can't, because I mean, my two careers are professional racing boats as a crew and a newspaper. The two worst careers you could ever have. So, I mean, I don't have any serious money in the bank. So for me to get to the starting line, I needed the assistance of either corporate sponsors or individuals. And I think I only raised about $8,000 on GoFundMe, and I raised about $330,000. Okay, so I believe I raised more money than anybody except Damien, and applied it towards the boat and getting it ready.
And so was that from individuals or companies, or who did you go to? Who did you reach out to when you were raising that money?
A few things. I mean, when one, I worked as a professional racing crew, so I had a whole career of wealthy boat owners that I sailed with. Okay, so they wanted to help in some way. I own literally the smallest newspaper in the smallest island, in the Florida Keys, the United States. So being the publisher of that, I'm extremely well known. I actually came to Key West in 1973 as a sophomore in high school. So I've got a long tenure here, except the time that I was in Miami and Detroit. And so, it's I only did a few things which you saw about asking for money. Most people would just come and say, "How can I help?"
Wow.
So, I think you gotta, I'm turning. Well, I was 67 at the start of the race. You gotta lead a pretty decent life. You gotta be a pretty decent guy. And these friendships and acquaintances, from friendships, obviously most people are long term and stuff. And then, it snowballs. It just absolutely snowballs. There was no guarantee I'd make it to the starting line. I mean, when I was in the Atlantic on my sat phone, I raised $20,000.
Wow. And look, we know how much of an achievement it is to even start the race. I think 32 competitors entered, only 16 actually made it to the start line, and now there's only 4. So, we know how much of an achievement it is, and it is incredible. There's one thing actually that we found curious, because you clearly have a competitive side. You've talked a lot about racing. We've listened to other interviews with you, and you talk a lot about racing, and you talk about winning and wanting to win the race. But there's another side to you too, which came across actually when we spoke to Pat, and that of all the sailors that were racing down to Lanzarote, you were the one that was sharing weather with the other sailors. So I just thought that was a really interesting thing, because obviously everybody wants to win, but also you had this other side where you were sharing the information with the sailors. So how do you marry those two things together? I just thought that was really interesting.
Well, for one, like I said, you spend a lot of time before the race getting to know the sailors. Okay. Even when Abolish was in India and didn't even have a program put together, he and I would talk, because I was pulling information of his experience from 2018. Same thing with Istan, the American-Hungarian that did the 2018 race and stuff. And we weren't, well, no, I don't think the difference in the race was going to be me sharing the weather. I mean, Abolish ended up calling me the weatherman. I said, no. Nobody likes the weatherman. But no, yeah. And of course, everybody was appreciative of it, but I wasn't doing it for a pat on the back,
Yeah, but it was appreciated, and that was very clear from speaking to Pat.
Yeah.
Speaking of weather, we know you did some prep on the boat itself. Shane already mentioned you reduced the mast size. You added an extra bulkhead up in the forepeak, right? And you strengthened the chain plates. So you were obviously, was this in prep for heavy weather? And if so, what was your strategy for heavy weather? We know you've experienced big winds in the States. I've seen you talking about it before, but one thing that you hadn't experienced was massive seas. So did you have an approach or strategy for heavy weather? Was it to tow warps, chains, drogues, and what was your approach for that?
Well, well, it was sort of like I would try anything. So when I left Charleston to sail my transatlantic, unexpectedly, really unexpectedly, because I was working with meteorologists from the U.S. Weather Service in Key West. No one knew, but a tropical depression formed right behind me. And the first 3 days of me sailing, I sailed in 40, 50 knot winds and 20, 25-foot seas. And the boat loved it. I loved it. You know, I was down below in my boat and didn't even know I was in stormy weather. That's how impressed I was with Spirit. She was just on a broad reach, just trucking. But you know, I had a parasail, you know, so I could stop the boat if I had to. I didn't have a drogue, but I had warps, and I would have experimented that if the boat couldn't be controlled. Okay. But I've never done them before. Like I never set any, I mean, in 50 knots, I didn't need it. You know, in 25-foot seas, I didn't need anything like that. And that's the worst weather I sailed the boat in all of the 6,000 miles I've sailed her to this day.
And in terms of warps, could you maybe explain to the folks that wouldn't be familiar with heavy weather sailing what the idea is to kind of tow warps and what that really means? So how does it work?
What you're trying to do is to slow the boat down, right? And I'll give you a great example of this because and it'll blow your mind because it blew mine. On that stormy weather that I had, you know, off of the East Coast, the first night I woke up and I had a GPS and my GPS said 12.5 knots. My GPS hadn't fallen or anything. I said, how does a Toshiba go 12.5 knots? The very next night, boat speed. The very next night, it said 14.9.
Wow.
My God. And of course, I'm asleep through all this. I'm not even aware of it.
You must have been surfing.
A storm passes, and you know, somewhere in the trip, I call up Bob Perry, who's the yacht designer. I said, Bob, have you ever heard of any of your boats like this going those speeds? He said, Guy, if you got a long enough wave, it's like an escalator. Gravity takes over.
Wow.
So now you're in the Southern Ocean, and you've got 100 feet or more between the swells. So now the escalator is really long, right? And the boat is accelerating down it. So when you hear about a boat pitch poling, as an example, the boat accelerates down the wave, buries the bow in the wave. So when your boat's accelerating, there's not a lot of pressure on the sails of the rig. Then you bury it into it, slows down, and as it loads up, you know, if you were a helmsman, you'd be pulling on the helm because it started having weather helm. But with a wind vane type system, it can't do that. So chances are the boat rolls out, lays on her side, and if you happen to have one of those cross waves coming at the same time, you really get the mast in the water, or you actually roll it. So what a warp does is slows that progress down that slope. Okay.
Brilliant.
Captain Coconut is in his cockpit has two small like boat trailer tires, and he would attach them to his warp, 1, 2, or whatever, to slow it down. And I didn't have any tires, but if I do another race, I probably will.
That's an excellent explanation.
Yeah, that was fantastic, Guy. That was really brilliant. So you're throwing warps, big heavy ropes off the back of the boat to create friction and just slow the boat down.
And to keep the stern lined up with the waves.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, look, that's great.
This is our storm jib, and it's rolled up probably half or more. And you've trimmed it. You know, you either got to trim normally, or you actually sometimes they put it just center line, and you go straight down you line the boat up straight with the wave. So you're asking me what would I do? I don't know, but I'm an expert to know I'll figure it out.
Okay, awesome. Look, we've covered weather. one of the fears, or two of the fears that you mentioned before starting on the race, were fishing boats and orcas. I don't know if you had any interactions with orcas, but I do know you had an interaction with a fishing boat, and your shin had an interaction with a part of the deck. So how is your shin, and can you tell us what happened with the fishing boat?
Well, my biggest fear is ships and fishing boats. Because as we get close to the shore for checkpoints is where you get to the smaller boats. Now, smaller boats, as an example, the boat I almost hit was 80 feet long.
Oh.
But, you're a solo sailor. You're not on deck very much. You got daytime, you got nighttime. It really doesn't matter because you're navigating, you're doing all the other things and taking care of yourself and sleeping and stuff. And I was in the Bay of Biscay, and I saw fishing boats around, but I didn't really think anything was in my path. And I was down below doing something, sitting at the nav table, and you get sort of like a sixth sense, and maybe I heard something, but I doubt it. And then I look up out of the companionway, and literally 50, 60 feet in front of me is an 80-foot fishing boat, and I'm a T-bone, just T-bone.
Wow.
And as I bounded out the companionway, I tripped, I hit my shin, it gashed virtually all the way to the bone, released the cleats on the, because I just used cam cleats on the tiller, and I pulled it hard over, and I missed that boat by about 10 or 15 feet. But he's dragging net, so my net's confirmed. I've got to hook the net onto my keel or something.
Did you have a proximity alarm? The proximity alarms that are on boats? Are you allowed to have one of those?
Yeah, but one of the things, we carry a French system, and so you can't see the AIS. It sort of beeps. And two things: one, it beeps all the time, but so I wasn't happy with it. But I also had it in a bad position. So the second day or the third day of the GGR, we had 30, 35 knots, and I was pitched across the galley, and I broke it.
Oh no!
It had a big, and I actually snapped it off, and it was in pieces. So I didn't have an AIS alarm anymore.
Wow. I didn't realize.
And how is the shin? Has your shin recovered? Because you got a pretty nasty gash.
Oh yeah, no, it has totally recovered, except that about 10 days ago, when I was in the Bahamas on a sailing vacation, recover from all this drama, I hit my shin in the exact same place.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Nothing as bad as that, but it's in the exact same position.
So while you mentioned drama, let's talk about the grounding, guys. So on your trip down to Lanzarote, you were positioned well in the fleet. You passed through the gate, you met Don, and you headed off late at night on your trip to kind of over the west side of Fuerteventura. What happened next?
Well, I have to start before then. So, Lanzarote, which is the most northern island of the Canary Islands, and the checkpoint is at the southern tip. So you've got this vertical, narrow island. And Fuerteventura is an almost identical island, separated by only 6 miles. So just a few kilometers. And so, you're coming in, and, with celestial navigation, within 25 miles, you consider yourself doing a good job. The problem is that you can't see 25 miles. So as I'm approaching, as I'm thinking I'm getting to the northern tip of Lanzarote, I'm up the whole time, and I'm looking, and I'm looking, and I'm looking. So by the time I see it, and I hit it right on, I could have chosen to go down the west side or the east side of the island, and I went down the west side. And right in front of me was Kirsten by about 3 miles or 4 miles in front of me. And when she went past Lanzarote, she gave it a wide berth. Now, I'm a racer. I went right beside the bloody island. But now it is now approaching midnight. I passed her because she sailed a longer distance. and she's following me into the checkpoint by about 20 minutes, and that's all I could see her bow light. And so I go through the checkpoint, and you can see the videos and stuff. I felt good. Everybody, my friends, my family said, "Man, you were tired," and they were right. So I went through the checkpoint, and I made a tactical, stupid decision. All right, I'm not really a solo sailor. And I made a racing decision, say I was a 4 to 12 hour advantage going on the west side of the island. And Simon was only about 24 hours in front of me, and he was the leader. So I wasn't going to lose any time to him, and I went to the west side of the island, which made Fuerteventura a lee shore. Kirsten, going through the checkpoint, went the other way. So I've been awake now for about 33 to 35 hours. And I'm sailing close haul, but I'm laying, what we call laying, the Fuerteventura lighthouse by about 30 degrees. I got no problems whatsoever. I made a coffee. I'm smoking my cigar. It's a beautiful night. It's only blowing 12 knots. But again, I'm 67 years old, and eventually I get tired and I fall asleep. The breeze dropped off its pressure, and the boat took a turn to port. And she sailed right up on the lava beach. And even though it was light wind, it's a surfing beach. So there's surf there. And bam, bam, and bam. You know, the boat's being picked up and dropped about 3 feet on its keel, and then eventually on its side. And when it hit initially, I was in the cockpit asleep, and I was thrown halfway out of the companionway, halfway through the lifeline. It's a deserted part of the island. There's no lights, there's no houses, there's no businesses. And quite frankly, I wasn't really sure where I was because I'm fatigued, I'm disoriented. And after I started the engine and rolled up the jib, I couldn't get it off, and she's laying over almost on her side now. I went down below and made a mayday call.
And like, what was your feeling when that happened? Was it one of fear? Was it shock?
Oh, it's one. You know, I'm a big guy, and the best way for me to describe is I was in a fight with a silverback gorilla. You know, because each wave and each drop, it would be like Superman would pick me up and throw me across the boat. And it wasn't until I got down the companion where I could sort of like wedge myself in with the microphone, but still the violent hitting of the boat was there. And you know, but you know, I was only in about 3 feet of water. You know, the search and rescue, fire department, the medics, the police, they lined up on the beach with their headlights on the boat, and I'm down below, and all of a sudden I can sort of hear a voice and a light coming through the companionway, and I went out, and there was one guy on the deck, you know, asking, was I okay? Anybody else aboard? The usual, and he helped me get the main down, and then we jumped into the surf.
And how long did it take the emergency services to answer the mayday call, and how long did it take them to arrive?
You know, I'm going to, I don't know. All I can say is, let's say talk total time. From the time that I think I hit to the time I was at a 5-star resort, dripping wet in a lobby, was 3 hours. That was it.
That was a relief.
It must have been terrifying initially. Like, it must have been absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, because you know, like they're going on the radio, and she could hear it. I mean, I'd talk to her, but you know, and it wasn't my brightest moment. They're going, so where are you? I said, I don't know. I don't have a GPS. And Kirsten goes, Guy, you open your ditch bag. And of course, we carry GPSs in a ditch bag, which of course is sealed. So once you open it, you're out of the race. Of course, that wasn't going to be anyway. So yeah, so I was able to turn that on, give them the coordinates, and
at what point did you speak to the GGR, like to Don and the gang? Did you call them from the satellite phone, or were you off the boat at that stage? Or can you remember?
I think it was the next morning.
Okay.
So I slept about 3.5 hours because I got checked in at. I mean, literally, when I left the boat, I brought a dry bag with all the electronics. My EPIRBs, all the really expensive stuff. That's what I took off the boat. I had a pair of tennis shoes, shorts, a dry shirt, and a jacket, and my wallet and passport, and that was it. So, I went to the hotel. I literally walked into the shower with my clothes on, and then laid down, slept 3.5 hours, and woke up with, what do I have to do to get my boat off the beach?
And by the time you spoke to the GGR crew, were they aware of what happened?
Hold on. Yeah, they were aware because of I did hit the EPIRB.
Uh-huh. So, Guy, you ended back at the hotel, and when you got back to the boat, I know some items were taken from the boat. Can you maybe just tell us what happened there?
Well, if you don't mind, I've got to elaborate more on the process.
Sure.
So, immediately I start trying to figure out how to get the boat off the rocks, either, finding a salvage company that can float it or a construction company that could pick it up. And so I even though it was Sunday, I started, researching or trying to come up with things. And on Monday, I started, I rented a scooter, couldn't rent a car, and running around and asking people at the ports and things like that, to help. And, lack of, it's a Spanish country. I don't speak Spanish. And as much as I love the Canarians, at this part of the game, whatever question I would ask, the answer was no. And you could tell at this stage that the people that I was talking to had no interest in helping, even though, in my opinion, it was part of their job to do it. So Sunday, Monday, and on Tuesday, let me say on Tuesday, nobody had touched the boat. I was going there every day, but because I couldn't rent a car, you can't sleep aboard the boat. It's in the ocean on her side. And there's nothing there on the beach. I would go back to a hotel room. So after Tuesday, I decided I'd go to Lanzarote to see if I could find somebody there to help. And I thought I did. This experienced marina owner, manager, and stuff, he said he could help. And so I felt good. And I got back to the boat on Thursday morning. And on Thursday morning, discovered that someone came aboard her and stripped off a lot of valuable equipment. About $60,000 of equipment. The hydrovane, the Watton Sea, my life raft, 3 of my sails, ones that were not on the rig, 2 of the winches on the cabin top, all my food, all my freeze-dried food, 1 of my sextants. It was quite extensive. Blocks, lines, halyards, winch handles. It was pretty sad, actually.
Oh, that's awful, Guy. I'm so sorry to hear that.
It's terrible. And like, they obviously knew what they were doing if they targeted kind of the high value items.
Well, yeah, and I mean, the hydrovane and they took. It's not just they took like the mechanism. They took the mounting brackets off the hull, and you had to have somebody inside the hull and somebody outside the hull, to do all that. So, yeah, it was a sad case. So now it's Thursday, and I'd met quite a few of the Canarians, and when I say this, they're mainly Europeans at this stage, and they agreed to help me bring a truck down and get the sails off the boat and anything else that I could of any value. And I'm standing on the deck. It's low tide, so there's no sea around the boat now. And I guess what I should say, over those 5 days now, there's 2 tides a day, and each day the boat would be picked up and moved. So initially there was just a lot of deep scratches in the boat, but by Thursday there's a big hole, And so I'm standing up on top of the deck. I'm probably, 12 feet, since the boat's a 12-foot beam, and I'm standing on her side. And a young man comes up and he says, "Are you the owner?" I go, "Yeah." He says, "Well, my name is Tristan Mullins," and he's actually a UK citizen, but he's lived there for quite some time. And he says, "I have a meeting with a government official, a crane operator, and a road builder in 3 hours." I asked him, was he associated with the ones in Lanzarote? He said no. He did this all on his own. He's a surfer. He's a guy about 38 years old. And so, we got the things off the boat that day, and then I'm standing there, and all these people are having this meeting in Spanish. But basically, these two contractors agreed to get the boat off Friday, because on Saturday the weather was going to change and the boat would have been destroyed. So I said, it was going to be expensive. I said, "Well, give me an invoice on what you'll do, and I'll send you the money." So the road guy started bringing sand in to go out over the lava rocks, and I sent him his money. The crane guy didn't send me his invoice till much later, so the money wouldn't have been there. And he was a nice guy, but he basically on the phone, "I'm not doing anything till I get paid." So it cost 20,000 euros to get the boat off the rocks. It was not inexpensive.
Wow.
And so the road contractor guy knew the weather situation was getting late in the day, and he called up this crane operator and said, "I've been paid. This guy's good. Get your butt down here." And he did. So the sun had set by then, the tide is coming up, and the last opportunity to get the boat, the rig out and the boat on a truck happened successfully. Ta-da!
So this surfer just came out of the sunset basically and offered help. Is that did he just coordinate just to help?
Yeah. This young guy did this all on his own.
That's amazing. And I hadn't heard that.
Spirit would not be here today if it wasn't for his initiative.
Oh, wow. What a legend.
And do you keep in touch? Is he still on the island?
Well, originally, yeah, no, we kept in touch. I haven't spoken to him for a month or more. Thanks for reminding me. He went to Greece to buy a 36-foot steel Dutch boat, and he was going to hire me to sail it from Greece back to Lanzarote.
Huh.
And his plans got delayed, so I wasn't able to do the trip.
You should give him Sean's number. Sean could do it.
So, obviously, it was a very difficult experience, Guy. And it's one thing to end up on the rocks and then having stuff taken from the boat, but it's another thing to bounce back from that. And bounce back, you certainly have done. So we've been following the reconstruction work that you've been doing down in Gran Tarajal, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, in the southeast of Fuerteventura. So can you tell us about what your starting point and let us know how the rebuild is going?
Well, I lucked out, and I was referred to a guy named Ramon, who has a marine company in Fuerteventura called Sea Wolf. So he drove up on Saturday, on Monday. So the boat's sitting on a tractor trailer outside of a resort there, and he came up to look at the boat and the trailer, and he says, "Okay, I'll make the arrangements to get into the port at Gran Tarajal." And then I had to pay the crane guy, because he owned the trailer and the truck, another 3,200 euros to get it to Gran Tarajal. And so the boat was brought in, picked up, and Ramon sat it on some wooden jack stands. And I started meeting the most wonderful people in the world. And they're a Belgian couple, Celine and Sam. They own the jack stands. They just finished refurbishing a boat for 9 years. So instead of a ladder going up, I got a staircase going up to the deck. And and a whole bunch of other people. A Swedish guy, Esbjorn, lent me tools. An Irishman, Owen, lent me tools. Eventually, I met a Dutchman named Christian, who's become pretty much my best friend there now. And I set about coming up with a plan to rebuild the boat. So my team manager, Birch Ollinger, after the start of the race, he went on one of those walkabouts crossing Spain. And so he eventually heard about my problem and reached out and said, okay, I'll come over and assess the situation with you. And he's a civil engineer. And when he saw the boat, he told me to throw it away.
Wow.
But you didn't.
No, I didn't. But he stayed for 10 days. And with Birch's help, the yacht designer, Bob, who sent me the drawings and stuff, we were able to build a mold that by the time Birch was done, I could begin the fiberglassing. So there's an American who runs a yard in Porto Clara on Lanzarote, West McSorley. He gave me thousands of dollars of fiberglass, resin, and I still haven't paid him for it. He hasn't given me an invoice yet.
Wow.
So I brought that back to the thing, and I just started working 7 days a week.
Incredible.
So
that's amazing. That's incredible.
Yeah. So, the boat ran aground on September 13th. 15th, 10 days. By September 25th, the mold was built, and I started doing the fiberglass work.
Wow, that's a quick.
And then,
just in relation to the boat going aground, Guy. Just one thing we spoke to Pat about as well is just the general attrition of this race. The GGR. We saw it in 2018. We're seeing it again now in 2022. There's only about 4 boats left. Can you just talk a little bit about what you think about the attrition of this race? Like, is it a safe race? Is it is it really the race of madmen? Like, the attrition of the race, it's unparalleled.
Yeah, any solo race nonstop around the world is a race of attrition. If you look at the Vendée Globe race, which is professional sailors with huge budgets, 30% of those boats don't finish. Look at the great British sailor Alex Thompson. Okay, I think he's done 5 of them, and he's only I think it doesn't matter. I mean, you read the stories of all these sailors. Think about Alex, and it's just one issue after another. I consider a Golden Globe boat actually a safer boat than a Vendée Globe boat, because I don't think. Well, I know it won't stay inverted.
And apart from the Toshiba 36, your own boat, what was your favorite boat in the GGR race?
Well, my next choice would have been Kirsten. Kirsten has the second fastest boat of the boats that started.
Yeah, it's a real.
That
was Pat's choice as well. It's a popular boat. It's the heaviest boat, I think, as well. I'm curious, Guy. Are you watching the tracker updates every day from the GGR?
Every day.
Every day.
Yeah. That's the great thing about the GGR is that the people who watch it get so enthralled with it, and I do believe so many people watch it every single day.
Yeah, look, we're totally hooked on it. I mean, I think it's only going to get more popular by the time 2026 comes around. And on the subject, Guy, can you tell us, are you going to be doing the 2026 GGR?
Well, I promised myself I would not make any decisions regarding anything until the end of this year. But I went on a 3-week sailing vacation. So I flew back to the States for Christmas. I've been here since December 22nd. And then a friend of mine invited me on a 3-week sailing vacation to the Bahamas. And that first week of the Bahamas, I slept for the entire week, basically. And so I was able to clear my mind and recharge myself. So like the GGR before, I can't do anything until I raise the money. That doesn't mean I won't start trying to raise the money, but I haven't made any announcements. And the problem I have with the GGR today is just 2026. I've worked 4 years to get to where I am right now. And it's an unfinished business, and I definitely want to finish it. But to wait another 4 years, I think is, I would like to do something before then. So I'll tell you guys, and I guess more people will learn, I'm going to try to make the starting line to the Global Solo Challenge this September.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. That's
Brilliant.
massive news, because Pat's doing that race as well.
Well, Pat's the same boat. He needs $60,000, he says, to do it. I need quite a bit more because of the damages to my boat and loss of equipment and stuff. So that race is a totally different race. I don't think we have a chance to win it, which is, of course, I'm a racer. I was doing the GGR as an epic thing to end my sailing career, but I was doing it to win the race. I felt I had everything in place to win the race. So the solo challenge would be something I would do. I would sail the boat hard to win the race, but because the design range is 60 to 32 feet, the classes are established with IRC ratings. It is a staggered start, so I don't know how you can figure out exactly which boat is favored. I do think boats like mine potentially have a slight advantage, and that's only because I think as amateur sailors, okay, which is what I think all the people in the Global Solo Challenge are, is that I can sail this boat to her potential, I think, more consistently than an amateur sailing an open 40 or an open 60. But that's just my feelings. I don't have no idea if it's based on reality.
Wow, that's brilliant news. We're delighted to hear that, Guy.
Amazing. That's amazing.
Well, I have to quickly, and since I raised my money primarily through people I knew, I've already heard from people that the well has been tapped. So, and they were very gracious, and if no one gives me another dollar from that, but I'm an optimist, and as I've told one of my friends so I had a friend who gave me some significant money, him and his wife, but then he went to his friends and he raised another $35,000 on top of that from his friends who I don't even know. Okay. And he said that group of people are not giving me any money again. So
Brilliant. Look, we're going to be watching that really closely, Guy. There's just a couple of questions we want to ask you before we finish up. One is, and both myself and Shane both spotted this, but 200 cigars. People are probably wondering what we're talking about, but we know you had 200 cigars on board. One, you smoke a cigar a day. Well, you'll tell us all about it, no doubt. I did some calculations, and I think if you started on September 4th, you'd need to finish by the 23rd of March. That would give you 200 days. Do you still think that was a realistic date? Or do you think when you're coming up the North Atlantic, you'd have to go west and maybe head over to Cuba to pick up a new supply?
One, they were not Cuban cigars, but I think you're off by a month. I think the middle of April is 200 days.
Oh, okay.
I think April.
Check my calculations.
Yeah, it's okay. It's all right. And it was my feeling and belief that 3 boats would finish in under 200 days. And this race is different, and it's going to take them longer than Jean-Luc took. And so I was wrong on that count, no matter what. But the cigars were stolen as well, just to let you know.
No.
You might have been wrong on that, but you were right on 2 things actually on a previous podcast. Number one, you predicted Elliott's repair wouldn't hold. You also predicted Kirsten would be in first place by Cape Horn. It looks like you're going to be right on both of those things.
What was the first thing I said?
Elliott's repair. You said that wasn't going to hold.
It wasn't going to hold, no.
Which I thought was an interesting prediction because that turned out. But you also predicted he would make it if he went under stay sail and Reef 3, that he'd make it to Australia. You were right about that. Thankfully, obviously, great that he was able to make it. Shane, I think you had a couple of final questions.
There's one question I wanted to ask you before we finish up, Guy, and it was a question I asked Pat as well. And I suppose it's a bit of a philosophical question in terms of, obviously you want to be the first American to win the Golden Globe, but do you think there's a deeper reason why you just want to do this? Like, why do you want to do it? Like we were asking Pat, do you think it's kind of the hero's journey? Is there something there, or is it just a competitive nature within you from when you were younger?
Yeah, no, I understand. When the original race happened, I was all in. I thought that was what I wanted to grow up and do.
Yeah.
It was the coming across covering Olympic sailing, which sidetracked me to that. And when the race was announced in 2014 or something like that, I didn't think anything about it. I had no interest in doing the Golden Globe. It was only after the race started and that I start getting attached to it and addicted to it. So in January of 2018, I was pretty sure I wanted to do the race. But my personality is I come up with all these different things I want to do, and then I pare them down. So one day I'd say I was going to do the race, and the next day I'd say no, and yes, and no, and yes, and no. And my birthday is April 23rd, and I said, whatever decision I make on April 23rd, I'm going to stick with it. And there you go. I was going to do it. So then I knew I was really all in.
That's incredible.
As mentally and everything else. So
wow, that's amazing.
And I'm working on rewriting my story for GoFundMe, a website on these new goals and stuff. And just to let you know, if I don't raise the money, then the O-Star is what I would do in 24.
Okay.
And if I go O-Star, then I would probably then continue on and do the GGR, I think. But it's too far out to know that.
Well, look, maybe we can do more interviews with you again leading up to 2026. It's amazing that you to have you speak to us, and thanks so much for joining us. It's been amazing to speak to you. You're a legend.
Guy, just before you go, how do people find you? Because people will want to contact you. Obviously, you mentioned a GoFundMe page. What's the best way to contact you? Is it through Facebook?
Yeah, I mean, Facebook, and I'm having trouble with Facebook because my personal account, I can't make it professional. So I'm capped at 5,000 followers, which is what I have. I'm setting up everything under a new sort of corporate business thing that is potentially going to be a nonprofit called Spirit Adventures. And so following Spirit Adventures or just Guy DeBoer on Facebook, because through Messenger and that, you can reach out to me and stuff.
Cool.
Because I'm gonna need help to attain these goals, and I've got a group in New York that has given me money, so I'm going to go up and give some speaking engagements up there, and keep proceeding with this on this next adventure.
Cool. Well,
Awesome.
best of luck with it, Guy. And maybe we can come over. I know your favorite restaurant is Harpoon Harry's. I heard you say in an interview. So maybe we can come over and get them to get some Guinness on tap there, and we'll come over for a pint and help you fix up a few boats.
That's a diet. We do have Irish pubs here in town, and that we actually have a new one named Sally O'Brien's. But there's quite a few. There's quite a few Irish pubs.
You're a legend, Guy. Thanks so much for talking to us.
Thanks, Guy.
My pleasure. You guys have a great day.
Thanks a million,
Yeah,
Guy.
too.
So thanks everyone for watching. That was our interview with Guy DeBoer, and what an amazing character. Thanks everybody, and we'll see you on the next episode.